All right, welcome to the Self-Care Summit. We've got Dr. Cyrus Khambatta in the house. What's going on?
How you doing, man? Good to see you.
Good, bro. Good to see you, man. Thanks for being on. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Cool. So Cyrus and I, we go way back. I don't know how famous you are now. Are you famous just in Costa Rica, Latin America, or all the world? How famous are you now, man? Ever since you?
I'm trying to stay humble, Nick. I mean, over the last couple of years, the presence online of our business, Mastering Diabetes, has grown tremendously. So at this point, let's put it this way: I'm a medium-sized fish in a very small pond.
Oh,
Right?
I love it. Perfect.
To the average person, they're sort of like, who the heck is this joker? But if you live with diabetes, you probably have seen me on YouTube.
Awesome, awesome. So Dr. Cyrus Khambatta, you're a leader in type 1, type 2 diabetes. Cyrus also has a PhD in nutritional biochemistry from Berkeley. Some of your stats, and so we wanted you on to talk about nutrition and talk about healing yourself through diet and a lot of the self-care practices you use. So I want you to kind of kick it off. Tell us kind of who you are, how you got to being where you are, and maybe your own journey with health and wellness. I know you have some really unique experiences in your own life when it comes to your own health. So if you wouldn't mind sharing some of that, it'd be cool to start there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me on here, by the way. I really appreciate it. So I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 22, which is actually a pretty late diagnosis for type 1 diabetes, because type 1 diabetes is usually associated with kids who are like 2 years old or 5 years old or 8 years old. And that's when the majority of those with type 1 diabetes get diagnosed. So I developed it at 22 when I was graduating from Stanford University as a senior, and I just wanted to sort of graduate from college and just move on with my life. And then overnight, I was diagnosed with a chronic disease. So I went to the hospital because I felt terrible. I had very low energy. I was urinating like 17 to 20 times a day. I can't even explain how. I was so thirsty that I was like driving me insane, because I would drink a glass of water, put it down, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm thirstier. And then I would drink another one, put it down, and I was like, I think my thirst is growing no matter how much fluid I put inside of me. So I picked up the phone, I called my sister, who's a doctor, and I said, hey, these are my symptoms. And she's normally really, really cool under pressure. She started crying immediately. She said, go straight to the hospital.
Whoa.
You're telling me that you have type 1 diabetes, and that's real serious. This is life-threatening. And I was like, I don't have diabetes. And she's like, Cyrus, I don't have time to explain. Just go. Now, at that time, I didn't know anything about nutrition because I'm, studying engineering, and that's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I thought diabetes had something to do with old people and cake. That's it. And, that was the extent of my knowledge. So I go to the hospital. They check me in. My blood glucose is 6 times higher than it needs to be. They start giving me a drip irrigation of insulin, and then they also start giving me IV fluids in the other arm. And within 24 hours, I got discharged. And they, I went from being like a happy-go-lucky college student to a chronic disease patient within 24 hours. Now, while I was in the hospital, they actually kind of stitched together this confusing puzzle that had been unfolding over the course of the last couple of years. And what they helped me understand was that I was diagnosed not with 1, not with 2, but with 3 autoimmune conditions within a 6-month period.
Jeez.
So the first one was Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, which is a autoimmune version of hypothyroidism, in which my thyroid gland does not produce a sufficient amount of thyroid hormone. Number 2, I got diagnosed with Alopecia Universalis, which is just a fancy super nerd way of saying you lose your hair. So I got no hair. I literally have no eyebrows, no eyelashes. I got nothing.
I do need to see a picture of you with hair. I've never seen one, I don't think. So send me one later.
Maybe we can flash one on the screen at some point. So I got diagnosed with that one secondly. And then type 1 diabetes was the 3rd autoimmune condition and the icing on the cake. So I get discharged. I go back home, and I was like, wow, what is going on with me? I don't understand. So it took me about a year to get my act together. For the first year, I was just listening to the doctors, and their prescription is eat a low carbohydrate diet. That's what you do. If you have anything that has carbohydrate in it, like bread, cereal, pasta, rice, fruit, vegetables, potatoes, legumes, corn, any of those foods, your blood glucose is going to go up. Mm-hmm. You're going to inject more insulin. The more insulin you inject, the more variable your blood glucose is going to be, the more complicated it's going to get. the higher your risk for developing complications in the future. So eat less of that. Eat more meat, more chicken, more fish, more eggs, more olive oil. Eat things that are higher in fat and higher in protein.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. You know, you're telling pretty much a kind of carnivore to eat more carnivorous. I was like, great.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a great prescription. So let me do it. So I did that for a year. At the end of a year, I felt so bad, so terrible, that I knew I had to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
Lower energy, joints hurt, muscles hurt, couldn't exercise the way I wanted to, depressed, confused, anxious, blood glucose was a disaster. So I was like, all right, enough with this. I'm done. I can't live this way.
And none of those are synonyms with the guy I know, you know, which is wild to hear you say that you were in a state of, in essence, chronic disease, because that's not the person that I've known for so long now in terms of your attitude, your energy, your perspective, your physicalness, all those things.
Yeah, it's funny actually, because if, you know, like you're saying, this happened way before you and I met each other. It would be interesting to go back in time and interact with each other at that time, because you would have seen a completely different person, completely different. And so I decided to make a change. And the change, I didn't know what the change was. I just knew I had to do something different. So I started reading books and watching movies and attending scientific lectures. And there was a voice in the back of my head that was literally saying to me, it said, learn how to eat.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know how to eat. You're just listening to advice from other people. You don't know anything about nutrition, and you're just putting stuff in your body, and that stuff is not working.
Yep.
Learning. And I was like, wow, that's powerful. Okay, cool. So I started, you know, a personal research project. And every door that I opened said plant-based nutrition, plant-based nutrition, plant-based nutrition. I didn't know why, but the universe was clearly trying to communicate something to me. So I said, great, let's do it. So I started eating more plants, eating less animal-based foods.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up working with a nutritionist. His name is Dr. Doug Graham. He went on to write a book called the 80-10-10 diet, and he teaches people how to adopt a fully plant-based diet and thrive. So I learned under his tutelage, and he transformed my life within a week, literally. And so I went to eating, you know, more plants, to eating only plants. And at that point, my blood glucose became more controllable. My energy levels came back. I was more hydrated. I was sleeping better. I was using less insulin. I felt like $1 million. And I was more like the person that you know today.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward, I put myself back to school because I was so interested in this like scientific experiment that was happening in here that I wanted to learn more. So I studied. I enrolled in, in a sort of intermediary programs to get me into graduate school. Started learning human biology, chemistry, organic chemistry, you name it. And then I applied for PhD programs, went to UC Berkeley, and I studied nutritional biochemistry there, where I was able to like dig deep, like real deep into the actual scientific literature to try and find out what is this hoopla called diabetes and why it's so freaking confusing.
Yeah.
And what I learned in this process is that, you know, we as a scientific community have known for almost 100 years now, 100 years. We know what causes diabetes. We know how to treat diabetes. We know how to reverse diabetes using food. Except all of that knowledge about plant-based nutrition, about how to minimize animal product intake, how to minimize protein and minimize fat intake and increase carbohydrate from whole sources. All of that information has either been stuffed away or it's been ridiculed over the course of time. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, what the general public does is the exact opposite. And,
sure.
And part of the reason why, you know, diabetes is not just kind of creeping up a little bit, diabetes is now doing this.
Mm-hmm.
It's unbelievable. And so long story short, you know, I created a company called Mastering Diabetes, which is an online coaching program to try and teach people the exact same process that I went through and that my co-founder Robbie went through, also with type 1 diabetes, because it was really confusing at the time. And we want to provide people with a solution that actually can help you fully reverse prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, or manage type 1 diabetes like a champ.
Mm-hmm. So how did you go from, you know, being in college, studying this stuff, to then waking up, you know, one day in essence and saying, I'm going to now live my life and my passion and my purpose is going to be to teach other people how to heal themselves through nutrition. I mean, what was the click there that kind of got you into this trajectory now of being, let's call it a wellness coach or a wellness professional? How did that all happen?
You know, I'm not necessarily sure that I had a choice in the matter, because as I was learning this whole process for myself, that same voice that told me to learn nutrition was also telling me that there are millions, if not hundreds of millions of people around the planet that are experiencing the same problems that I experienced. And so it almost became this sort of like ethical responsibility where, you know, I would go to sleep at night and I would think to myself, like, okay, well, you know, what can I do with this information? I could just go work at a biotech company. I could do that. I could work at a pharmaceutical company. I could do that. I could, you know, I could become a professor. I could do that. Right. Or I could teach people how to actually transform their lives from the inside out using very simple, but yet very powerful information.
Yeah. And I know we've talked before about how it's almost like this is a blessing in disguise. How, and you know me, like I'm big on finding the positive in everything and understanding how we're going to learn and grow. So I know we've talked about how you getting diagnosed with diabetes and Hashimoto's was actually maybe the best thing that's ever happened for your health. You mind touching on that? I know that's pretty personal and close to home, but I think that's really important to hear.
100%. Yeah. So in the same way that what I just said was that I felt like I didn't really have a choice to try and teach other people how to do the same process. I am firmly convinced at this point, without a shadow of a doubt, that I am a puppet, and that developing 3 autoimmune conditions and starting to teach people how to adopt a plant-based diet was written from the day that I was born. That yes, getting diagnosed with type 1 diabetes rocked my world. It threw my whole world upside down. But because I have the ability I can cope with trauma. I have the sort of, you know, I have the ability to handle large amounts of stress. And I turned that otherwise adverse situation, which can really floor people for decades at a time, right? It can really do that. I made a conscious decision at a certain point that I was strong enough mentally, physically, emotionally, and that I choose not to live my life as a victim. And I choose to take all of the skills that I had learned up to that point, up to those 22 years, and say, all right, maybe this is the biggest challenge I've ever experienced in my life, and maybe it'll be the biggest challenge I'll ever experience. But if I don't seize this opportunity, then I could be missing out on something that's truly so powerful and so valuable. And so I decided, you know, to start moving in that direction, start helping other people. Just like you said, there's no question in my mind. There's no question in my mind. Type 1 diabetes is now the greatest thing that ever happened to me. You walked up to me today and you said, hey, Cyrus, I have this pill, or I have this injection, or I have this surgery that you can take, and it will eliminate type 1 diabetes from your life. You want it? I would shake my head and I'd say, it's all yours, dude.
Wow. I don't think people hear that enough, that we are in essence the masters of our own destiny, masters of our own life. Now we are choosing in every moment how we want our experience to be. I think it's just 100%. A powerful thing. And I know out of almost everyone I know, you walk the walk when it comes to your own health, your own mindset. So in terms of walking the walk, how do you walk the walk when it comes to self-care? Because I know that's a forefront of your experience, and for you it has to be. So how do you walk the walk when it comes to taking care of yourself?
100%. I think it's a great question, actually, because it's different for everyone, as you know. You know, for me, I would say that there's 2 things in this world. Actually, there's 3 things in this world that I prioritize every single day of my life, and it's top in my consciousness. Number 1, I eat like a champion. And when I say like a champion, I say I eat a 100% low-fat, plant-based, whole food diet. And this form of nutrition has been shown over and over and over and over and over again in the research world to be a form of nutrition that leads to the lowest amount of chronic disease, period. Whether it's diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, high cholesterol, Alzheimer's disease, fatty liver, chronic kidney disease, you name it. Okay, this form of nutrition is something that I, you know, practice myself. I teach other people how to do it. and it's something that I do not compromise on. Period. End of story. Okay. That to me is the ultimate in self-care, because I say to myself that I live in this machine and I love this machine and I want this machine to function optimally.
Yeah.
Or if I'm in a situation where there are no options for food, that's it. I stop eating. I don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go to a restaurant and be like, oh, well, okay, I guess I'll order this egg, whatever, because like, nope, that's just not going to work for me, period.
I mean, it sounds like you're using the way you eat as a self-love practice then. If I heard you say, I love this machine, I love this body, whatever I put in, you're in essence putting love into yourself is what I'm hearing.
100%. There's no question about it. Yeah. Especially also because the foods that I'm eating, I love them so much that like if I had to eat animal products at this point, it's just like, I used to eat them all the time and I used to love the flavor of them, but now I just don't think I could do it. It's just not something that would seem appealing to me. Number 2, I exercise every single day. Okay. A minimum of 6 days per week, usually 7 days per week. And that is a form of self-care that I take very seriously as well for a whole host of reasons. Number 1, I love moving my body. Absolutely love moving my body. I've been that way ever since I was like a 1-year-old kid. My mom just like could not keep a handle on me. I was all over the place, running, jumping, breaking things, playing baseball, soccer, you name it. And she was like, oh, I have a maniac on my hands. And, I've known that from a very young age. And so, you and I are super active when we're in the same physical location as each other.
Oh, yeah.
And that's part of what I do as a human being. And to me, it's actually a form of meditation.
Totally. Absolutely.
Working out, when I'm in the zone, I lose the ability to think about other things. I'm not checking about my email, or I'm not thinking about my email. I'm not thinking about that conversation that I had with that person that maybe I could have done better in. I'm not thinking about the next thing that I have to do on my schedule. I'm here. I got to perform this exercise right now, because if I don't, I could get injured, and I don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
So it requires a full focus. And to me, that's a form of self-care that I get so much enjoyment out of. It's hard to put it into words.
Yeah. And I love the piece about that's your meditation, and it doesn't have to look like a yogi sitting with their eyes closed. It's like you're focused. You're not thinking about the past. You're not thinking about the future. You're here. You're present. Yeah.
Exactly right. So if you define meditation as, like full focus, then anything that gives you full focus is a form of meditation. And exercise does that. Exactly.
You must have had a good meditation teacher at some point.
Can't remember his name. What was it? Okay. And then just like you said here, the third thing that I would say I do to sort of practice self-care is that I try as hard as I can to put full focus into everything that I do. And that's something you taught me. I don't know if you remember this, but you told me, if you're sitting there typing an email, put your full focus into it. Okay. Don't try and multitask and do something else. Right. If you're sitting there cooking a dish, put your full focus into that, because the act of putting your full focus into something is and not sort of like splitting your mental energy into multiple directions can truly be very satisfying and do a sort of meditative release. And I try and practice that every single day.
Yeah. And the piece to add to that is, as you're filling yourself up with all this, then everyone you work with, they get 100%. They get Cyrus at 100, and they get all of your attention. I think that's super important to touch on too, is that self-care piece really for a lot of people is selfish, but at the end of the day, it's a selfless practice that allows you to have more impact and have bigger changes in the world. That's
a really good point, actually, because I think the way to think about self-care, at least the way that it comes across as words, is like, oh, this is selfish. It's about me. It's about me. It's about me. But in reality, you're investing in you so that you can give more to the outside world.
Yeah. Big time. Cool. Awesome. I love that stuff. In terms of how do we heal now? How do we heal through nutrition? I mean, there's going to be 1,000 different takes on this. You go read one thing that says plant-based nutrition is completely wrong, and then you read another article that says it's going to cure everything. So from your experience, how do we start to use food as a way, one is self-care, and then 2 as a way to heal? And I know your topic is healing through mangoes, which that's my favorite topic of the whole summit. So what are we there?
It's brilliant. Okay, so let me be fully transparent here, 100%. When I first entered the world of nutrition, I tried to open my mind to every possibility. I didn't go into it thinking, I'm here to prove that being a plant-based eater is the only way, is the best way to do it. I literally went into it thinking, I don't know anything, teach me. I want to learn. I want to understand what this whole hoopla is about, okay? At the time that I started learning nutrition, it was the year 2003. And it was, I would call it a mini circus at that time. And now it's a mega circus.
Yeah.
Just like on the internet, you type in foods for weight loss, foods for high blood pressure, and you get bombarded with so many people saying, I'm right, listen to me, don't listen to that guy.
Totally.
These people don't know what they're talking about. I know what I'm talking about. Subscribe to my newsletter, blah, 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 blah. That's the game that's being played right now, right? And so if you're an average, information seeker or consumer, and you're just trying to get healthier, it's exhausting. It's flat out exhausting because you're sitting there and you're like, I don't know what's real. I don't know what's fake. I don't know what has an ulterior motive. I don't know what's advertising. It's hard to tell, right?
Yeah.
And so over the course of time, as I investigated more and more and more, and as I started to really learn about the molecular mechanisms at play from the time that a piece of food goes into your mouth and it travels down your esophagus and gets inside of your stomach, and then how that food gets ripped apart and transported to other tissues and how it gets utilized for energy. Once I started to understand this whole complex biochemical circus, it started to become very obvious to me that there was a form of nutrition that is popular and sexy and exciting, but not very effective.
Yeah.
And then there's a form of nutrition that's a little bit less exciting and a little bit less sexy and a little bit less popular that's way more effective, okay? And so that split has occurred, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And right now, this world that's real sexy and real popular is the world of low carbohydrate nutrition, okay? It started with Atkins back in the 70s and then in the 90s, and then it became the zone diet, the South Beach diet, the paleo revolution, now the ketogenic revolution. And it's all the people sort of reiterating the same concept over and over and over again.
They keep selling the same thing.
They're selling the exact same thing. And there's a lot of money to be earned. There's a lot of money to be earned in this world. And the people who do it well do a very good job of, convincing people using science that actually is relatively flawed at its core. Okay, so I could go on for years about how that science is flawed, but I'm not going to waste anybody's time with that right now. Point being is that the other form of nutrition, which I am obviously a huge fan of and that I use and that I've taught thousands of people to do, is more on the plant side of things, which is, I'm not telling you to be a vegan. You don't have to be 100% plant-based. None of that. Like, let's get rid of these words. I'm just literally telling you to try and eat more plants and try and eat less animal-based foods. That's it. Literally just move in that direction.
Yeah.
If you want to move all the way over to the right-hand side and become a pure vegan, do it. If you don't want to, don't do it, right? But the farther and farther and farther that you move over to the right, according to the evidence-based scientific research that is done in large numbers of people over long periods of time, what you will find is that the people who go further and further and further to the right get better and better and better outcomes, period. So you get to decide. Here's a self-care practice. You get to decide where you want to sit. Okay, you get to decide how much of a challenge you're willing to give yourself and how far you're willing to push yourself and how much of that practice you want to incorporate into your life as a self-care practice. If you decide that you want to sit right in the middle, do it. It's fine. Okay, but just know that by sitting in the middle, you're in kind of a little bit of a no man's land. Right? And if you want to push yourself a little bit over to the left-hand side, then understand that you're allowed to be there. Nobody's going to stop you from being there, but your risk for chronic disease is going to go up over the course of time.
Yeah.
So that's a long-winded way of me saying that, your original question was, how do you use food to your advantage, right? Well, on a daily basis, this is a simple way to think about plant-based nutrition, okay? Every time you eat a fruit or a vegetable or some beans or lentils or peas or leafy green vegetables or grains, what you're doing is you're eating a packet, okay? And this packet is this three-dimensional matrix.
Okay,
And
love it.
if you were to like rip this matrix apart, what you would find is that there is very nutrient dense, incredibly nutrient dense, okay? So the matrix itself is held together by this mesh, and this mesh is called fiber, okay? So in the same way that you build a concrete overpass for cars to travel over the highway, okay? If you open that thing up, you'd find rebar inside of it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Rebar are these metal rods, and the concrete surrounds it, and the rebar actually holds the concrete together, okay? Same thing, the fiber is actually holding this three-dimensional matrix together, okay? So you rip that apart. Inside of that, you have the three macronutrients, the carbohydrate, the protein, and the fat.
Mm-hmm.
Plant-based foods tend to have more carbohydrate, less protein, less fat. De facto, that's just the way they are. Most plant foods, okay? Then on top of that, you have your micronutrients, and the micronutrients are the key. The micronutrients are the things that you find a lot of in the plant world and very little of in the animal-based world,
Mm-hmm.
okay? These micronutrients includes vitamins, minerals, fiber, water, antioxidants, and these things called phytochemicals, which are chemicals that are only found in plants.
Okay.
And these are chemicals that plants use to protect themselves against predators and protect themselves against UV radiation. And when you eat those phytochemicals, it also has very profound antioxidant activities inside of your body as well.
Gotcha.
Okay? So this three-dimensional matrix it has so much inside of it that when you eat this entire thing, and it goes inside of your mouth and it travels down your esophagus and into your stomach and gets into your small intestine has to sort of rip this thing apart and pick out individual nutrients and figure out what to do with those nutrients, okay? As a result of it being such a complex collection of nutrients, it takes time and it takes a lot of sort of like physiological processes to sort of get access to things and specific enzymes here and specific enzymes there. Point being is that time is what enables you, number one, to stay full for longer periods of time, which is a good thing. You're not constantly having to go and eat and eat and eat. Number two, it prevents rapid changes in things like blood glucose, rapid changes in your cholesterol levels. In fact, your cholesterol levels will probably go down on a plant-based diet, okay? You don't get large surges in fatty acid availability in your blood because there aren't that many to begin with. And so your blood chemistry isn't affected in a negative way as a result of eating plant-based foods. And in fact, you can think of eating plant-based foods as like this thick soup of real rich antioxidant, antioxidant rich soup. And when you're eating that, your blood is constantly being given more and more and more disease fighting nutrients that over time decrease your inflammation level. They'll allow your brain to work better.
Sure.
They allow your thyroid gland to work better. They allow your liver to work better. They allow your muscles to work better if you use your muscles a lot. Okay. There's thousands and thousands of effects that you can write down on a piece of paper. And they all stem from the fact that you're eating foods that are so nutrient dense that the collection of nutrients can't be replicated in any way, shape, or form from a packaged product.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's what I was hoping you would touch on, is the difference between nutrient dense and calorically dense, where I think most people don't know the difference. But that the analogy there is perfect. I mean, I was eating a burger the other day, and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, there can't be that much nutrients inside this thing. Like, I'm eating dead flesh, tastes great, I love it, and I'm kind of wondering how much I'm actually getting from this outside of the macronutrients. So that even helps clear up a question that was literally running through my mind just a couple of days ago of like, how much, like, I know I'm not getting the minerals, I'm not getting the micronutrients, I'm not getting the the cytophyllene. It's like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, exactly right. So the calorie density comes from the fact that you got a lot of macronutrients, like you said, the carbohydrate, fat, and protein. So if there's a lot of that stuff, then the food is considered to be a calorie dense food. If there's very little micronutrient density or there's, little vitamins, minerals, fiber, water, antioxidants, and phytochemicals, then you have only a calorie dense food.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're eating a food that has macronutrients and has the micronutrients inside of it, then you're eating something that's called nutrient dense. And as a result of being nutrient dense, that's when you get all these disease fighting protective benefits.
Yeah. And I love the other piece you said about your brain being more consistent. I mean, that's the second you say that your blood sugar is not going to go up and down. I mean, that to me instantly goes to, wow, now that's mental performance. That's mood enhancement. That is, in essence, I'm going to guess an antidepressant at the same time. If my experiences are constantly going up and down, you go back to the meditation piece. It's like, that's just adding fuel to your meditation, to your mindfulness game. I think that's something to think about in terms of how do I make this thing even more effective and optimal. That's a really great takeaway.
100%. Yeah, there's actually some studies that I was reading recently that shows that people who migrate towards more nutrient-dense plant-based diets actually score better on these depressive symptoms exams. So they show up with a relatively high depressive symptom score, and then over the course of 6 months to a year to 2 years to 3 years, they consistently score lower and lower and lower on the depressive symptom scale. And as a result of that, they report, oh, I can think clearly. I'm more optimistic. I like my life more. And like, you can't trade that. You can't put a price tag on that.
No, not at all. That's awesome. I love that piece. That's great. Sure. Awesome. I know you got to get going. Thanks for all the info. I got some great takeaways. I know everyone else has. How do we get in touch with you? How do we find your stuff? If anyone's interested in learning more from your coaching and from your takes on nutrition and health.
Perfect. Thank you for having me on the summit, by the way. I totally appreciate this.
Absolutely.
If you want to learn more, the best place I could direct you to would be to go to masteringdiabetes.org. And, majority of your listeners probably, they don't have diabetes. They're probably like, I don't care about diabetes. But you might know somebody who does have diabetes, a family member, a friend, you name it. And even if diabetes isn't your focus, there's a lot of information on our website that talks about other diseases like hypertension, high cholesterol, fatty liver, Alzheimer's disease, et cetera, et cetera. So you can find a lot of information there. And then on social media, on Instagram, you can look up Mastering Diabetes as well there. And then on YouTube, which is a place where we publish videos pretty frequently, we also have a YouTube channel called Mastering Diabetes as well. So
awesome. And I've listened to the podcast too, which is great as well. So
podcast, of course, I forgot about that.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, Cyrus, thanks so much for the time. Awesome. And like I said, a lot of great takeaways and really appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much, Nick.
All right, man. Peace.
Bye.